Welcome back, friends. I'm here with another fantastic story. In this episode, we'll be listening to the story of Henry and Elena. Sit back and get ready to dive into the adventure. Enjoy the show. The fire had given up arguing with the cold about an hour ago, and Henry was losing too. He'd come to the ridge of Moon K7, designation only, because nobody had loved it enough to give it a name, to log atmospheric readings for a survey company that paid him in promises and freeze-dried stroganoff. 100 miles of black ice in every direction. The kind of alone that stops being a fact and starts being a personality. So when the tent flap parted without a whisper, Henry did what any seasoned Xeno surveyor would do. He yelped, knocked over his thermos and said, "We're closed." She stepped inside anyway. His first coherent thought was that the moonlight had somehow walked in wearing a person. Skin so pale it seemed lit from within, dark eyes too large and too sad, and ears that swept up into delicate points, the kind of ears that did not appear in any field guide he'd ever falsified. His second thought, arriving with the grace of a dropped wrench, was, "Oh, you're one of those." He didn't know how he knew. Something ancient in the lizard part of his brain stood up, looked at her, and quietly began composing his eulogy. She lowered herself across the dying coals, folding down with a stillness that suggested either great patience or great hunger. Her gaze moved over him the way his moved over the last ration bar at the end of a long week. "Hi," Henry said, because his vocabulary had abandoned him in the snow. "Big fan of personal space, myself, but please, make yourself at home in mine." She tilted her head. The words clearly meant nothing to her, but the sound of them, the babbling, harmless, terrified music of a man talking to fill a void, seemed to puzzle her out of whatever she'd come in planning to do. Predators, in Henry's limited experience, did not expect their dinner to crack jokes. "You don't talk much," he went on, voice climbing an octave. "That's fine. I talk enough for a small colony. Ask the survey company. They've filed complaints." The wind screamed against the canvas, and for a moment they simply watched each other across 8 inches of ember glow. He noticed she was shivering. It was such a human thing, so unfairly, disarmingly ordinary, that some of the fear leaked out of him and pooled into something more complicated. "You're cold," he said, softer now. He pushed his spare thermal blanket across the floor with one boot, the universal gesture of "I would prefer you didn't kill me, and also here's a blanket. Take it, I run hot." Anxiety mostly. She looked at the blanket. She looked at him. Then, with the careful suspicion of someone who had learned the hard way that gifts have teeth, she drew it around her shoulders. Up close he could see the hunger in her face wasn't only the eating kind. It was older than that. Lonelier. The look of someone who had been the last living soul for 100 miles in every direction, for a very long time. "Henry," he said, tapping his chest. "I'm Henry. Apparently we're roommates now." A pause. Then in a voice like wind finding the gap under a door, she tried it. "Henry." And then, touching her own collarbone with one pale finger, "Elena. Elena." He let out a breath that fogged between them. Okay, see, this is going great. Nobody's eaten anybody. 5 stars. Would be marooned again." The corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile, she didn't seem to know the shape of one, but the intention of a smile, like a language she'd forgotten she spoke. It undid something in his chest that the cold had spent all night tightening. He understood, watching her huddle in his blanket with her sorrowful eyes and her impossible ears, that he should be afraid. Every instinct insisted on it. His heart was slamming against his ribs hard enough to hear, and that was the strange, terrible joke of it, the punchline the universe had saved for the end of the loneliest night of his life. His pulse pounded exactly the same, whether a thing was about to kill him or about to matter to him. Fear and longing, it turned out, used the very same machinery, and on a frozen nameless moon with the fire nearly out, Henry honestly couldn't tell which one had just walked into his tent. So he said, when he could trust his voice again, he fed their last stick of fuel to the coals, and the small light bloomed between 2 people who'd each believed they were the only one left. "Tell me everything. We've clearly got the time." Telling her everything turned out to be harder than Henry expected, mostly because Elena understood maybe 1 word in 9, and the 9 she did understand she collected like a magpie. Cold, fire, Henry, blanket, stroganoff. He'd taught her that last one by accident, and now she repeated it with great seriousness, as though it were a sacred term, which, given the alternatives in his ration crate, it nearly was. "Stroganoff," she said, weighing the pouch in her pale hand. "That's the spirit. Lower your expectations and you'll never be disappointed. It's how I've approached my entire career." He dug out his wrist console, a battered field unit with a translation matrix that the survey company swore worked on over 4,000 catalog tongues. A number Henry had always suspected they'd invented during a meeting. He thumbed it on. It chirped, scanned the air, and produced a small apologetic line of text. Language not found. Did you mean silence? Useless, Henry muttered. 40,000 light years of human progress, and it's got the comedic instincts of a vending machine. But Elena had leaned toward the glow of it, fascinated, and when she spoke again the unit hiccuped, stuttered, and began, haltingly, badly, like a child reading upside down to catch fragments. Her language wasn't sound so much as intention. The console kept flagging emotional undertones it had no boxes for. Longing, apology. It rendered her first full sentence as, I did not come here to be warm. The fear which had been dozing opened one eye. Right, Henry said carefully. And yet, the blanket, the sitting, the very cozy ambiance we've established. I came because the cold takes the slow ones. The console offered, and I have been slow for a long time. She touched the points of her own ears, then her chest, where he noticed now, something beneath her skin pulsed faintly, a soft blue rhythm like a second, deeper heartbeat. My kind do not freeze. We do something worse. We sleep, and we wake hungry, and we forget why we were ever gentle. Henry sat with that. Outside, the wind kept up its one-note opera. The blue light under her skin throbbed, slow and patient, and he understood it was a kind of clock, that she was, in some literal sense he didn't have the biology to name, running out. Okay, he said. So you're telling me you walked 100 miles across a moon that wants us both dead, found the one warm idiot on it, and your big plan was what, exactly? Because so far it's mostly been borrowing my blanket and insulting my dinner. The console thought about it. I had no plan. I followed the heat. When I found you talking to no one, I forgot the hunger and remembered the talking. It has been 400 years since anyone talked to me. 400. He set the unit down very gently. The way you'd set down something that had just casually revealed it could ruin your whole evening. 400 years. Lady, I get lonely if my supply drop is 2 days late. Elena, she corrected, with the faint not quite smile from before. Not lady. Elena, sorry. He scrubbed a hand over his face. It's just 4 centuries alone in the dark, and the first thing you do when you finally find company is threaten to eat him. I want you to know that's a very relatable instinct, but socially we're going to have to workshop it. The console gave a small electronic shudder and produced. It was the first time it had logged that one from her. She'd made a sound, barely anything, a breath with an edge of music in it. And Henry realized with a lurch that he had just made an alien laugh, possibly for the first time in 400 years, and that he would now do almost anything to do it again. That was the trouble with him. He'd talk his way past a firing squad if you let him. And somewhere between the blanket and the bad joke he'd stop tracking which of them was the dangerous one in the tent. The blue clock under her skin pulsed. Her 2 large eyes watched him with that terrible mix of hunger and hope, and Henry, cold, broke, marooned, and abruptly, idiotically unalone, felt his own heart answer it in the same doubled rhythm, fear and wanting beating on the exact same drum. All right, he said, and fed the fire what little they had left. 400 years of stories, start at the beginning. We'll get to the part where you don't eat me later. She started at the beginning, and the beginning was a ship. The console fought her the whole way, rendering her sentences in fits and fragments, but Henry was getting good at filling the gaps. Turned out 400 years of solitude and 3 weeks of his own had taught them the same grammar. There had been a vessel, a generation thing, vast and slow, hauling her people between stars at a crawl because the universe had declined to invent anything faster. They slept the centuries away in something the console kept calling the long dark cryo, he guessed, though her word for it carried more dread than the brochure version. You went under. You woke when you were needed, and the waking left you hungry, because the cold leached something out of you that only the living warmth of another body could put back. So it's not blood exactly, Henry said. It's what? Heat, life signs, vibes. Heat, the unit agreed. And the thing under the heat. We were made to take a little, and give a little, and survive between the stars together. A pause. Together was the whole design. One of us alone does not work. One of us alone goes wrong. And you're the last one. She didn't need the console for that. She just looked at him, and the look said everything, and Henry felt it land somewhere under his sternum. The ship had broken. Not dramatically, no explosion, no villain, just the slow arithmetic of entropy, 400 years of small failures adding up to one large one. The others didn't wake. She did. She'd walked out of the long dark into a tomb full of people who looked asleep and weren't, and she'd been carrying that hallway around inside her ever since, across every frozen mile of K7, where the wreck still sat half-buried over the northern horizon like a beached whale that had given up swimming. Okay, that's... Henry stopped. The joke he'd lined up curled up and died, because some things you don't make jokes about, and a girl walking alone out of a room full of her unwaking family was firmly one of them. That's the worst thing I've ever heard, and I once watched a man propose at a funeral. The console logged amusement again, faint and grateful, the laugh of someone reaching for a rope thrown across a dark river. He'd give her the rope every time. He was starting to suspect that was just who he was now. For the record, he said, I'm sorry. Genuinely. Not the kind of sorry you say to fill the air, the real kind. The kind that costs something. He fished in his crate and came up with his last and most sacred possession, a single foil packet of instant cocoa, hoarded since launch, defended through 3 supply shortages and 1 minor mutiny of the spirit. He held it up like a relic. I was saving this for an emergency. I've decided 400 years of grief qualifies. He melted snow in the pot, mixed it badly, and passed her the cup. She wrapped both pale hands around it. The blue clock under her skin had slowed, he noticed, not stopped, but eased, as though proximity to him was doing the quiet work her design intended. She sipped. Her eyes went very wide. Good, right? Henry said. That's chocolate, humanity's finest contribution to the galaxy. We've also got nuclear weapons and reality television, but we don't lead with those. Chocolate, she said reverently, filing it beside Stroganoff in whatever shrine she was building to his sad little pantry. They drank in the firelight, passing the 1 cup back and forth, and something shifted in the tent that had nothing to do with temperature. He was telling her about Earth now, about oceans she'd never see, and rain she'd never stood in, about the absurd, loud, crowded warmth of it, and she was leaning in, drinking the words faster than the cocoa, and Henry understood he was doing the exact thing her whole species had been built around. Giving a little, taking a little, surviving the dark together, because alone went wrong. The blue light pulsed soft and slow beneath her skin. Her shoulder had drifted, at some point, to rest an inch from his. And Henry, who'd come to this nameless moon precisely because it promised no one would ever need anything from him again, felt his traitor heart pick up that doubled rhythm, the fear and the wanting indistinguishable as ever, and decided recklessly that he didn't need to tell them apart tonight. Your turn, he said. Tell me one good thing. 400 years, there has to be one. Make me jealous. She thought about it for a long time, so long he assumed the console had eaten the question, and then she told him about the lights. Between 2 stars, the unit translated, slow and careful. There is a place with no sun and no shore, and in that place the dust catches the old light and throws it back in colors. We would wake one of the sleepers, just one, to watch. It was a great honor. You spent your warmth to stay awake, and you spent it on beauty, and that was considered a fair trade. She turned the empty cocoa cup in her hands. I was chosen once. I was very young. I stood at the window for 9 days and did not sleep, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I have had 400 years to be sure of that. 9 days at a window, Henry said. I once watched a documentary about glaciers for 6 hours because the remote was across the room. I want you to know I understand commitment. The breath with an edge of music again. He was collecting them now, the way she collected his words. But as she laughed, the blue light under her skin gave a sudden stutter, a hard flicker, like a candle when a door opens somewhere, and her whole face changed. The hunger he'd watched her hold at the door, the thing she'd been quietly winning against all night, surged up behind her eyes and took the wheel. She went still in a way that wasn't calm at all. Still like a held breath. Still like the half-second before ice cracks. Elena, he didn't move. Hey, stay with me. Tell me about the lights again. I cannot. The console's text came out jagged. It comes faster when I am happy. That is the cruelty of it. The warmth I want is the warmth that wakes the hunger. I should not have let you be kind to me. She was gripping the edge of the bedroll now, knuckles bone white, the blue beneath her skin pulsing fast and bright and wrong. Move away from me, Henry. The cold takes the slow ones, but I take the warm ones, and right now you are the only warm thing on this moon. Now a smarter man would have moved. Henry had been called many things by many supervisors, and smart had never made the list. So he stayed exactly where he was, an inch from her shoulder, his pulse hammering that doubled drumbeat he still couldn't read, and he said the most useless and most honest thing in his arsenal. No, the console blinked. No, I've been the only warm thing on this moon for 3 weeks and I am sick of it. You think I'm scared? I'm terrified. My whole body's voting to run. But here's the thing about me, Elena. He spread his hands, helpless, grinning the crooked grin of a man betting everything on a bad hand. I have never once in my life done the smart thing when the kind thing was sitting right there looking sad. Ask the survey company. It's also in the complaints. You are an idiot, the unit translated, and underneath it in small flagged letters, despair, hope, hunger, all 3 at once. The machine had finally found a feeling it couldn't sort, because it was 3 feelings wearing one face, and Henry knew that face. He'd been wearing it himself since the tent flap opened. Probably, he agreed, but your whole species was built on one rule, right? Take a little, give a little. Survive the dark together. so don't take all of it. He held very still and turned his hand over, palm up, an offering and a dare. Take a little. I'm told I run hot. Anxiety mostly. I've got warmth to spare and absolutely no one else to spend it on, and 400 years is too long to ask anybody to white-knuckle it alone. The wind screamed. The fire ticked. The blue light raced under her skin, and her two large eyes filled with something that the console didn't even try to name. It just gave up and wrote, Elena, as though she had become her own untranslatable word. For one long trembling second the hunger leaned all the way forward, and Henry, heart-slamming, fear and wanting beating the exact same rhythm they had all night long, did not pull his hand away. She took his hand. Henry braced for a lot of things. Teeth, cold, the lights going out, a tasteful obituary noting he'd died exactly as he'd lived, badly and on purpose. What he got instead was warmth flowing out of him, slow and strange, like the first 10 minutes of falling asleep poured directly into his palm. Not pain, just a gentle, drowsy emptying, the sensation of being quietly read by something that had missed the sound of another voice for 4 centuries. The blue light under her skin steadied, brightened, calmed. Huh, he managed, a little dreamy. That's okay. That's not what I expected. I expected the Discovery Channel. This is more like a really aggressive nap. Be quiet, the console said, but the flagged feeling under it was relief, so vast it nearly crashed the unit. I am trying not to take too much, and you are not making it easier by being charming. Can't help it. Survival mechanism. You should see me at funerals. And then, this was the part he'd remember. Later, on warmer worlds, she stopped, pulled her hand back while the hunger was still right there in her face, still leaning, still wanting. She'd taken a little. She had every reason and every appetite to take the rest, and 100 miles of frozen dark would never have told a soul. She let go anyway. The blue clock pulsed slow and steady beneath her skin, fed but not full, and her two large eyes came back to herself from wherever the hunger had dragged them. There, she said. That is enough. That is the design. A little, not all of it. You stopped, Henry said. It came out stupider and more reverent than he meant. You could have, and you stopped. I am not the cold, she answered, and the console rendered it with a weight that made his throat tight. The cold takes everything because the cold cannot choose. I can choose. For 400 years I had nothing to choose between. Tonight I do. She looked at their hands, hers pale, his ordinary, lying open between them. I choose the version where you keep talking. The hunger only wanted to keep you. So do I. They are not the same thing, and I have just now learned the difference. Henry sat there with his heart doing its doubled drumbeat and realized the rhythm had finally quietly resolved. Not fear anymore. He could tell them apart now. It had taken an alien nearly draining him on a nameless moon to do it, which was frankly on brand. Okay, well, he said, because tenderness made him itch and jokes were how he survived it. For the record, that's the nicest thing anyone said while declining to consume me. Low bar. Historic clearance. The breath with an edge of music, fuller this time, almost a real laugh. 400 years thawing out of her one sound at a time. He fed the fire the last of nothing, and they sat shoulder to shoulder while the storm started, at long last, to lose its voice. And because he was Henry, and because hope embarrassed him, he wrapped it in logistics. So here's my pitch, he said. My supply ship comes in 11 days. It's slow, it's ugly, it smells like a gym bag that's seen war. But it's warm, it's got room for 2, and the survey company is technically obligated to extract any sentient life I find. You're sentient, your life, I checked. He bumped her shoulder. I found you, or you found me and threatened to eat me, which the paperwork will gently reframe. And then? The console asked. And then anywhere, Earth if you can stand the noise, there's rain, there's oceans, there's chocolate that isn't powdered which is going to ruin you. He paused, the joke running out, the true thing underneath it showing through the way it always did with him. And there's me, talking too much, running hot. Built apparently, for exactly one thing, giving a little, taking a little. Surviving the dark with somebody so neither of us goes wrong alone. I had the design and no one to use it on. Turns out you've got the matching half. She was quiet a long moment. Then she reached over, and instead of taking his warmth, she just held his hand. For no reason. For the only reason, because she could choose now and this was what she chose. Stroganoff, she said solemnly, like a vow. Stroganoff, Henry agreed, wrecked, grinning, no longer the only warm thing on the moon. Till death. Hers ideally, not mine. Dawn on K7 was less a sunrise than a rumor, the black going gray, then a thin embarrassed silver leaking over the ice as though the moon wasn't sure it had earned the light. But the wind had finally shut up, And that alone felt like a miracle, and Henry crawled out of the tent into the hush with Elena behind him and decided he'd never again take silence for granted, having spent 3 weeks drowning in it and 1 night learning what it was for. The wreck was visible now over the northern horizon, just like she'd said, a long dark hull half swallowed by the glacier, her whole sleeping family carried inside it, across 400 years and one final shore. She stood looking at it for a while. He let her. Some silences you fill with jokes, and some you just stand inside together. And he was finally at 40-something and badly educated by the universe, learning to tell those apart too. "We could go," he said quietly, "before the ship comes. Say a proper goodbye. I'm told I'm bad at funerals, but I've got range." "No," she said, and the console which he'd clipped to his collar like a strange chirping pet rendered it gently. "They are not waiting for me to come back. I was waiting all this time for permission to leave. I think you just gave it to me." She turned from the wreck. "Let them sleep. I am done being a hallway full of the unwaking. I would like to be a person who got cold and found a fire." "That can be arranged," Henry said, throat tight. "Fire's kind of my whole brand." The supply ship came on the 11th day, exactly as ugly and gym-bag-scented as promised, dropping out of the gray sky with the grace of a thrown brick. Henry filed his report. Under anomalies he wrote one sentient life form, surviving, friendly, do not classify as hazard despite initial intentions, and under recommended action he wrote extraction, permanent, and then, because the company paid him in promises and he'd developed opinions about that, he added an raise. They gave him the extraction. The raise went the way of all his other jokes. Logged, ignored, beloved by no one but him. The translation matrix improved over the long, slow haul home, fed by 10,000 hours of Henry talking, which the unit eventually flagged as excessive deering. Elena's words came clearer the closer they got to Earth, until one day she didn't need the console for the small things at all, and the first full sentence she ever said unaided, looking out the porthole at a blue marble growing in the black, was, "It is very loud looking. I have decided I will like it." She did like it. She liked the rain, which she stood in for an hour the first time, ears and all, grinning at the sky like it owed her something and had finally paid up. She liked the oceans, which she said reminded her of the lights between stars except warmer, and you may put your feet in them. She did not like powdered cocoa anymore, exactly as he'd warned, and held him personally responsible, which he accepted as a fair trade for ruining her with the real thing. And the hunger, the old cruelty, the design that had wanted to take everything because it had been alone too long to remember restraint. It stayed. It didn't vanish. That wasn't how it worked, and she'd never lied to him that it would. But it had what it was built to have now, somebody to give a little to, and take a little from, and survive the dark beside, so it never again went wrong. Some nights she'd take his hand, and the blue light would steady, and he'd go pleasantly, stupidly drowsy, and mutter something insufferable about the Discovery Channel, and she'd tell him to be quiet in 4 languages, and that was the whole architecture of their happiness. A little, not all of it, the only love story it turned out that her species and his had ever really had in common. Henry had come to a nameless moon to be alone, because alone meant no one needed anything from him and nothing could be taken away. He'd been so proud of that fortress. It had taken 100 miles of dark and a pale woman, with elf-sharp ears and a 400-year ache to walk through the one flap he'd forgotten to seal, and teach him the thing he'd spent his whole life joking his way around. That the warmth you keep for yourself just freezes, and the warmth you spend comes back doubled, and a fortress is only a very tidy way of being the last warm thing on a moon. Years on, when people asked how they'd met, and people always asked, because of the ears, Henry would lean back, straight-faced, and deliver it like the punchline it had always secretly been. "I thought I was alone," he'd say, reaching for her hand. "Then this woman walked into my tent to eat me." A beat. Reader, she did not. Mostly. And Elena, every single time, would lift one eyebrow and say the most romantic word she knew. Stroganoff. The end. We've come to the end of another story, friends. Please don't forget to like the story, leave your thoughts about it in the comments below, and subscribe to Sci-Fi Traveler so you don't miss our next story. See you in the next episode. Take care. Goodbye.